Welcome to the midweek edition of Legal AF. We've curated the top stories, the intersection of law and politics, just like we do every Wednesday and Saturday right here on the Midas Touch Network. And these are the ones, we could have had our audience curate these. These are the ones that we just have to talk about. First, we'll talk about the immunity decision and its aftermath, Trump versus the United States, what it means for future presidents, whether they're named Donald Trump or not, what it means to this former president, and all the other current cases that are out there. We're going to also talk about a companion case, Fisher versus the United States, and its impact on the Trump prosecution and on the Department of Justice going after Jan 6 insurrectionists who battled it out, many of them medieval style, for instance, at the West Portico, the West Terrace. And yet, will they be found to have violated the obstruction of an official proceeding crime or not? We're going to break it down for you. Then we're going to spend a considerable amount of time talking about Judge Chutkan. Yes, thank God we have to bring her back into the mix. And now that the the Trump versus U.S. Immunity decision has come out with remand and direction to the trial judge, we need to talk about the trial judge. And what is she going to do next procedurally in the month of July and beyond, both based on what the Supreme Court has ordered her to do in terms of sorting out official from unofficial conduct, from core presidential conduct, from absolute immunity to no immunity to immunity with a presumption. This all has to be sorted out in what effectively becomes, as was anticipated by our sister podcast, Mistrial, a mini trial from now until sometime over the summer, in which the entirety of the evidence will be presented against Donald Trump to the American people. It sounds a lot like a trial, and it sounds a lot like the American people are going to get a lot of data points before they have to go to the polls. Whereas our president put it, since the Supreme Court is not going to do their job and not going to allow the district courts to do their job in criminal justice to hold Donald Trump accountable, the court of public opinion is going to have to do it at the polls. So we'll talk about Judge Chutkan, the timeline for what we think is going to happen and what's going to happen there as that case gets back on track. And then we'll, of course, from a former prosecutor and a current defense lawyer, two defense lawyers now, we'll talk about whether, as Judge Ludig, who's going to be a guest of mine on Friday in another interview, whether the Department of Justice should straddle Election Day and the inauguration and try their case against Donald Trump, regardless of where it lands on the calendar. As Judge Ludig said in a recent interview, and I'm sure he'll have a version of it with us, this decision has become the unsoling SOUL of America, and he is commending the Justice Department to throw the political calendar out the window and prosecute this case on time, whenever that time is. We'll know more after we talk about Judge Chutkan. Then we're going to return to the implications of the immunity case on the New York case, which was led successfully by Karen Friedman-Agnifilo, my illustrious colleague's former office, the Manhattan DA. Sentencing has been delayed from 7/11 to 9/18. So, and Judge Merchan has signaled that he is going to hear, and it was not opposed by the Manhattan DA, which I think was a good move. We'll hear from Karen. The issue of whether this immunity decision at all maps onto the conviction by a jury of pre-presidential conduct by Donald Trump when he devised the scheme to pay off Stormy Daniels so she wouldn't go public with the story of them having sex. Yeah, sure, some of the invoices and payments were made on personal checkbooks and personal invoices by Donald Trump once he got into the White House, which was the fruit of his scheme, him winning. But that doesn't, I don't believe, convert what has just happened into official conduct for which he has any type of immunity. It certainly isn't core presidential conduct that comes from the language of the Constitution. Or as Judge Hellerstein once put it, it is not a presidential duty to have an affair and try to cover it up with bribery. That's not, and a payoff. That's not an official conduct. And I think ultimately even this United States Supreme Court will agree to that. But Judge Merchan's got to get to the bottom of it with briefing and an appeal to the state appellate courts, and maybe a jump the tracks and appeal to the United States Supreme Court. And then, we'll get around to a sentencing right in the thick of things. Or as I've said in a recent hot take, as a baseball fan, you don't win the World Series in July. You win the World Series now in November. And so the fact that it's been a sort of a rough week for the Biden administration with the win in the debate, the Supreme Court ruling in the debate. I mean, this is July, and we've got plenty of time, and Judge Merchan has plenty of time. We'll break it all down for you there. And if we have time, I don't know if we'll get to it. We'll talk about a couple of other decisions by the United States Supreme Court as they dropped all of their decisions and then ran off to their summer holidays. We'll do probably a special episode. I'm envisioning combination of Karen, me, and Ben over the summer, dog days of summer, as we like to say, where we take the plane up, look down at the 60 or 70 decisions by this United States Supreme Court last term and talk about what it means globally, macro, micro, what it means for the future, some of the cases they've already accepted for argument next term. October will be right on top of us. We're not out of the woods yet with this current makeup, and what it means for the selection of the president, who will obviously get, as every president has gotten almost to a one, at least one or two more picks on this United States Supreme Court. But Karen, we got a lot to talk about here as we enter our 4th of July midweek episode. How are you?
How am I? How are you? You're home for week 1 with a newborn. How are you guys doing?
It's doing fantastic. Knock on wood. And thanks to all the Midas Muddy and the Legal AFers, some of which follow me on social media, about baby Francesca. And stay tuned, because we did get her an amazing 4th of July jumper, newborn baby's first 4th of July outfit. And we will be posting it on the internet.
Oh, that's so cute. I can't believe how cute.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that. And I'm so happy to hear that you're doing well and everybody's doing well.
Yeah. Wife's doing great, right? She, listen, I did my part, but the lion's share of the work has been done and will be done by my wife. I'll be a great dad, I'm sure. I hope. My wife certainly says that I'm doing great so far, but let's be honest. It's a lot on her. And I do appreciate it.
I've said to you before what an amazing woman she is, and she really is an amazing person, as evidenced by the fact that she is already on a treadmill and it's a week out. I mean, she just makes people like me. When I had my kids, I was not her. Let's just say that.
I am so honored and proud that rocket ship that contained my wife landed in my backyard. Those many years ago from Krypton.
Yeah, exactly. Because she's really not. She's not. I said to you right before you were about to go into the hospital and give birth. I said, do me a favor, watch that movie, What to Expect When You're Expecting, because your wife is the one giving birth to twins, and I'm the stepdaughter, of her. That was me. So, she's just an amazing woman. And, but more importantly, I'm just so happy for you guys, and the baby is just so beautiful.
I'm fortunate to be surrounded by amazing women, and I'm looking at one right now. Let's talk about the immunity decision, because we have to. But we've had enough time now to digest it and sort of dust ourselves up. Yeah, it was a hit to the solar plexus of our democracy. But now we've all picked through the 50 or 60 pages of Chief Justice Roberts, seen the crappy things that Clarence Thomas wrote as a big red signal to
Judge Cannon.
Judge Cannon about maybe Jack Smith's not a properly appointed special counsel, and the whole thing can just go away for that reason. But we'll get there in a minute. Let's talk about what you picked up from the immunity decision, and then how you think the prosecutors and Judge Chutkan, what do you think she does? How does she call everybody back together? I'm assuming it's going to be next week, to bring them back to court to say, all right, we got the judgment. There are certain mandates that have been given to the trial judge by the Supreme Court. They want her to get down to it with a razor blade and look at that indictment and its overt acts and categorize things into core presidential conduct, for which there's absolute immunity, presidential official conduct, for which there is a presumption That can be overcome if the prosecutors show it's not going to improperly interfere with the exercise of presidential power in that way. And then just unofficial stuff that is naked and doesn't have any immunity protection. Fortunately, we've all looked at that indictment in DC election interference 10 ways to Sunday, and we've always thought that most of it is not is unofficial conduct. Now, there's one caveat. Supreme Court said, don't look at motive. You're not allowed to look at motive. You only can look at whether something is official or unofficial based on, I don't know, factors not related to motive in categorizing it. And they already went out of their way, even though they said it's really for the trial judge to develop a record here, but they went out of their way to say anything related to Donald Trump's interaction with the Department of Justice, including Jeff Clark and the acting attorney general, is off limits. Absolute immunity. We're going to take that off the board right now. So there goes the Jeff Clark and the weaponization of the Department of Justice in the waning days of the Trump administration as part of the prosecution. That's out the window. They've said the Mike Pence one, the interaction and pressure campaign on Mike Pence, may or may not be, depending upon the trial judge determining if this is inside the outer boundaries of executive power, official duties, about electoral vote counting, which I think is well outside what a president is responsible for. The vice president may be responsible for it, but not the president. That's left to be determined by Judge Chutkan after an evidentiary hearing. And then what is left over, right? What falls into this last bucket, and how big is this last bucket to salvage the indictment in the District of Columbia? Why don't you walk through what you saw and how we map this Supreme Court opinion onto the existing indictment in the District of Columbia?
Look, unfortunately, this case, the more you read it, the worse it gets. It's really just a travesty. And on the day before the 4th of July, which is such an important day in our history and in our democracy, you can't help but just really feel that the founding fathers are turning over in their grave at this decision. It is just really, really horrendous. The fact that the president of the United States now is a king, essentially, that he and he alone has absolute criminal immunity for doing his job. There's not a single other job in the country, not a Supreme Court justice, not a member of Congress, who has absolute immunity from criminal prosecution. It is shocking. Absolutely shocking to me that the laws do not apply to him. And when you play it out in the scenarios and you look at kind of how the parade of horribles could be, in addition to the fact that Judge Sotomayor in her dissent said the president could use SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his rivals, he's immune. He can bribe, someone in exchange for a pardon, immune. She goes immune, immune, immune. Now, they read each other's opinions. If the majority opinion and Justice Roberts disagreed with her assessment that you would be immune for doing that, if people are saying, oh, that's such an exaggeration, oh, the left is fear-mongering, what typically happens is Justice Roberts would take that as an opportunity to say, not true in the majority opinion, that the dissent says X, it is not X, which essentially is saying to the world, it is true, it is accurate, it is a fair reading of this opinion. And what shocks me the most is, and again, I'm looking at category number 1, his core official duties. I'm looking at the fact that the majority opinion says the Constitution requires the president to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. As such, there is a Department of Justice. They are the ones charged with taking care that the laws are faithfully executed. Therefore, you want to encourage a robust, don't look over your shoulder presidency where he'll talk to his attorney general and make sure that the laws are faithfully executed. And therefore, you are immune from being prosecuted, even if you commit a crime in that context, right? Think about that. Think about whoever he's going to install as the Attorney General of the United States. It's going to be someone who's loyal to him and somebody who it essentially pledges allegiance to him as opposed to the United States Constitution. If he asks them to commit a crime on his behalf, go after my political rivals, go assassinate go shoot someone, they can be prosecuted for it. He can't. He cannot. And you're not even allowed to look at his motives. You're not even allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to do anything because of this ruling. He is absolutely immune from crimes if it had anything to do with his core constitutional duties. Now, I know a lot of people say, why didn't Tanya Chutkan, the judge in the district court, make a record below about what's official and unofficial, and then we wouldn't be wasting all this time now that we're going to have this mini trial, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I think it's because it is so perplexing that anyone, how could committing a crime ever be in your job description? How could you ever be doing your job or in any way carrying out your duties if you're committing a crime? It just is such a head scratcher to me. So that in and of itself to me is just unbelievable that they would say that. Number one. Number two, the next category that you were talking about, the presumption of immunity, the presumption that the president gets. Once again, yet another kind of elevate him to a status that is above Supreme Court justices, that it's above members of Congress. They're supposed to be separate but equal. You're not supposed to have one that is higher than the other. And it's just very interesting that the Supreme Court is essentially consolidating power in one branch of government. And interestingly, there's another case that came down this week that overruled something called the Chevron doctrine, that the Chevron doctrine basically said, and if we have time, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but it essentially talks about what powers administrative agencies have, right? The Environmental Protection Agency, whatever it is, all the agencies that exist in the executive branch that are tasked under the Administrative Procedures Act, they exist in order to carry out the laws that Congress passes. Historically, under Chevron for the last 40 years, the administrative the agencies had a lot of power and a lot of authority, and the court took that away and consolidated it with themselves, right? They said, no, only the courts have power. Courts. So it's essentially what they're doing is they're consolidating power with themselves and the courts, and they are giving the president even more power. It is just incredibly just surprising and shocking to me, this decision and all of the decisions. It's hard for me to parse them out and say, oh, this one's worse than that. This one is truly the worst. But the part about this decision that to me takes the cake is that you're not allowed to even look at the motive, and you're not allowed to use any evidence. And that's the part that could potentially impact the Manhattan DA case. But that's what surprised me. But to answer the question, what happens next? What has to happen next is this case is being sent back down to the district court, where Judge Chutkan now has to hold a hearing, which Danya Perry, my colleague in law and in podcasting on our other podcast, Mistrial, she said a couple weeks ago, she said that she predicted this. She said, okay, even though clearly we're not going to have a trial in this case, we could have what she called a mini trial, meaning a hearing to determine what is official and what's unofficial. She, I think, predicted that this was going to be the direction they went, certainly not as far as they went, right? She didn't think they would go so far as to even talk about evidence. You can't even use evidence to prove other things in your case, if it involves anything involving his core powers. But this mini hearing or trial, if you will, if I were Jack Smith, I think the way I'd be thinking this through is I would put on my whole case, everything. I'd want a record. I'd want the judge to make a record of what's core presidential responsibilities, what's presumptive, what's in, what's out, essentially what's official conduct and what's unofficial conduct. Because if it's unofficial conduct, it comes in. If it's official conduct, it's out. That's it. And so I think that they should go through every piece of evidence and every witness and put the whole case on. And the good news is what that does is that gives us a preview of what the evidence is. Now, Judge Chutkan might preclude Jack Smith from putting on the DOJ piece of his trial because the Supreme Court has already ruled that that is clearly core presidential conduct or duties, and therefore is out. So there is a chance we won't get to see that. We'll only get to see the part about what could go either way. So that's what's going to happen. The other thing that the Supreme Court in this decision said in a footnote that Judge Chutkan has to do is also analyze the Fisher case that also came down this term recently that talks about whether obstruction of an official proceeding, the charge that two of the charges against Donald Trump and the charge that has been utilized in many of the January 6 cases, whether their decision about what needs to happen in order for that statute to stand. It's not okay to obstruct an official proceeding, for example, by breaking and entering. It has to be, you have to like rip up a document. It has to be involved. You have to involve something tangible like a document. So I think that's the other thing she's going to have to determine is how, because he's charged with 4 counts, 2 of them are obstruction of an official proceeding. In that case, she's going to have to make that determination as well during this hearing.
Well, yeah, that's a good breakdown. I mean, the way I've told people, it's a waterfall. Core constitutional powers, which are literally expressed in the Constitution itself. War powers, commander in chief. That's where the SEAL Team 6 stuff comes from. And some other executive branch function that is literally spelled out as an Article 2 power, absolute immunity. And what you throw into that bucket is going to now be up to Judge Chutkan, although, as you said, the Supreme Court has decided at least one of them in advance that she doesn't have to decide, which is his interaction with the acting Attorney General, Jeffrey Rosen, and with Jeff Clark and all that weaponization of the Justice Department. That's out. Things that are official conduct and the outer perimeters of that under the Blassingame case and other cases, that's going to get an immunity, and unless, not absolute though, unless the government, the DOJ, is able to overcome the presumption by showing that the prosecution would not improperly interfere with presidential authority or power. Which I think in some of the examples that we've been throwing around about crimes and go kill my opponent, I think they would overcome the presumption. So I'm a little less.
Let's play that out. Okay.
Sure.
So Donald Trump walks up to Jeffrey Clark and says, Donald Trump appoints Jeffrey Clark to be Attorney General of the United States. Yeah. Okay. And he says, I want you to go kill my opponent.
Yeah, I don't think that works. I don't think that even though on first blush it falls into some sort of absolute or rebuttable presumption, I think that he has gone beyond what is within the canon of the core conduct to order something that the founding fathers, the framers of the Constitution, never would have envisioned, is that he would be a murderous president. And I think even this Supreme Court, if somebody tried that, hey, let's try this. It's an owner's manual. Let me try to kill my opponent, or give an order to kill the campaign manager for my opponent, or wiretap the Democratic National Committee, like in Watergate. See, I think that whole.
I don't think they're even allowed to look at it. They're not, because you're not allowed to look at motive. You're not allowed to look at motive. It specifically says that.
You're not allowed to look at motive, but you are allowed to look at the crime being inside, or the alleged act being inside or outside core conduct. You don't have to get to motive. There is no way the United States Supreme Court is going to allow a president to push the button to kill an opponent. I know we like talking about it that way because it's very interesting, but it's not going to happen because they're not going to find that that's core conduct.
But Sonia Sotomayor put that in her dissent, and Justice
I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it.
But but she said, who's a member of the United States Supreme Court, said,
she is, in dissent,
said that conduct would be immune, and Justice Roberts did not disagree with her.
You don't have to, but that's not how Supreme Court rulings work. You don't have to disagree with every aspect of dissents and to say, well, no, that just like the majority opinion didn't adopt Clarence Thomas's special counsel is improper. So it's not always call and response in majority opinions by the United States Supreme Court. If they had a problem with it, there are some places where they get wounded and they're like, oh, I better take on the prosecution. I better take on the dissent. I'll be frank. I know Ben has said it too. I just don't see it. I see where there are certain things in his core powers that they're not going to allow you to touch. And yes, motive is one of them, and you can't put on evidence of official conduct to prove unofficial conduct. I get all of that, but they're not. They haven't, in my view, they haven't created a Leviathan, out of control imperial president who can commit murder on domestic soil and get away with it I just don't see that. I'll be honest with you. I just don't. Plus, as I did at a recent hot take, he would be impeached and convicted by the House and the Senate, which is the ultimate check and balance on the president, and removed from office. Whether or not it is an immune crime or not, the analysis of high crimes and misdemeanors, which starts from 1368 in Britain, and which was adopted by the framers of the founding fathers, says it's not a crime on the books. And as Justice Roberts said in this decision, impeachment is a political process. You don't look to the statute books to see if the crime happened or if there's even a crime that matches. Abuse of power, maladministration, abuse of public trust is all high crimes and misdemeanors. So that guy that you just described, or woman, or whoever it is, it ends up being removed from office. And then it's going to be up to a court to determine if the kill order is a core presidential function as outlined by Justice Roberts in this opinion.
See, I just see it totally differently.
I know you do. That's what makes for a fun show.
They don't get to high crime or misdemeanor because it's not a crime. He's immune.
No. But that's not the way high crime and misdemeanors ever been used.
And not only that, look what happened Jan 6. They didn't convict him. Right? He was impeached and not convicted. You think you can trust the political process in this divided world?
Well, let me unpack that.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me unpack that. High crimes and misdemeanors historically for the last 400 years has never meant an actual crime on the books. And it doesn't matter whether you have immunity. And I think Roberts recognized that when he said it's a political process and we're not touching the political process. See, Trump tried to argue you have to go through immunity, you have to go through impeachment in order to come out the other side to a prosecution. And Roberts said, no, you don't. That's a political process for removal, which is the penalty for impeachment and conviction. Now, whether you can get a majority of Senate to recognize a murderous president, I guess that'll have to be left for another day. Hopefully not. But I don't think it's going to fall into core, from the text of the Constitution, absolute immunity. Maybe it falls into rebuttable presumption official conduct. And then I think the prosecution is able to rebut the presumption by showing having a murderous president, if this is going to be our continued example, is outside the outer boundaries of official conduct and is not something that interferes with the normal operation of the executive branch. See, that's where I come out differently. Although I think it's fun to talk about the killer president.
I don't know. It's interesting, and I think I love that you have a different take, because
of course,
but I don't see it even remotely. I really see this.
You think there could be a killer president that the Supreme Court will ultimately say, yeah, that's fine. It was core presidential power.
He's going to say, you can't even look at it. He's not going to just go out and shoot someone, right? He's going to go out and he's going to, let's say he's going to order an investigation into his rivals.
How about I'll give you your example. He pulls the Secret Service detail for Biden if Biden loses and Biden gets assassinated. How about that? Is that okay?
I think he's immune.
Okay, I don't think he is. I don't think you can pull the Secret Service detail, but we'll see. Hopefully we'll never have to see. The problem that you and I are demonstrating by this debate, which is good because we always say in our notes we're debating, is the problem with it is that this decision is so opaque as to how human beings in trial courts are supposed to apply it to conduct, that it's going to be a tremendous Herculean task, for Chutkin through this mini trial. I agree with you. And I agree with you that they're not going to be able to put on evidence related to the Department of Justice. But at the top, when I turned it to you, I said, what do you think's left? I think there's a lot of the indictment and the 4 counts of the indictment left over that will be able to be, the evidence will come out this way before the election. And then there'll be a trial, which hopefully will happen. I don't know. I mean, it may not be November. It could be November, December, January. Somewhere in there by that point.
Do you
However,
think that, well, you don't think that he can, so this is another question. Like, say she has the hearing and she rules certain things are in and certain things are out.
she will.
You don't think he can appeal before
Yeah,
trial?
no, I do. I do. And there may be, I don't know if there'll be another stay of it. And then Roberts, who wrote the opinion, is going to be the first judge to get it on the appeal. First, it'll go to the DC Court of Appeals. And there's going to be a whole delay thing. And that's part of the calculus. That's why I know people are like, try the case. I'm not sure, the timing of all these appeals is going to actually come out. If you and I were talking about this 2 years ago, I feel a lot better. On obstruction, in the concurrence, Ketanji Brown Jackson gives the way to thread the needle and to say that the integrity of the certification process was impaired by Donald Trump's conduct and the use of false evidence, which is in the majority opinion in Fisher, I think salvages the claims against Donald Trump. And as you said, she's been directed to apply that as well. But that's another appeal processes delay thing. I mean, this is why back to Merrick Garland, if he had just not wasted a year to appoint a special counsel and just did it himself with Maine justice, we wouldn't be in this mess.
The originals, because I keep like, how did we get to this place, right? It's just unbelievable to me. And it's two things. The original sin is that my beloved Barack Obama, who I just think is the world's greatest president, left. I can't remember what the number is, but it's like 60 or 70 federal judgeships open, like some ridiculous number open for Trump to fill. And he filled them with these judges like Eileen Cannon, like Kaczmarek, like, the guy who, the Mifeprestone judge, like, other just extreme right-wing judges who are making these crazy rulings. And then, of course, unfortunately, Ruth Bader Ginsburg should have stepped down and let Obama fill that spot. And,
well, let me ask you something on that. And Mitch McConnell has had as much to do with Obama's problems in getting confirmations as Obama did getting out of his own way. Here's a question that we'll save for after our ad break. Otherwise, my producer's going to kill both of us with immunity. Should Sotomayor step down while Biden is still president? We're going to pick that up, and we're going to talk about what happens now with this immunity that Karen and I has vigorously debated. What does it mean for the Georgia election interference case? How does it map onto Mar-a-Lago? We're going to talk about the New York prosecution and the sentencing there being delayed for the briefing about immunity. And if we have time and we feel like it, we'll talk about what the overturning of the Chevron decision means to our day-to-day life. But first, we have some amazing sponsors this year, all brought together by Midas Touch Brothers and Jordy in particular. And here's a word from them. What if you could support small family farmers and reduce your environmental imprint, all while enjoying the highest quality meat on earth? When you join the Monk movement, you can. Moink delivers grass-fed and grass-finished beef and lamb, pastured pork and chicken, and sustainable wild-caught salmon straight to your door. Moink farmers farm like our grandparents did. And as a result, Moink meat tastes like it should. Because the family farm does it better, and the Moink difference is a difference you can taste. Unlike the supermarket, Moink gives you total control over the quality and source of your food. You choose the meat delivered in every box, like ribeyes, to chicken breasts, to pork chops, to salmon fillets, and much more. Plus, you can cancel anytime. Moink is helping save rural America. I love it, and you will too. Join the Moink movement today. Shark Tank host Kevin O'Leary called Moink's bacon the best bacon he's ever tasted. And Ring Doorbell founder Jamie Siminoff, he jumped at the chance to invest in Moink. Plus, they guarantee you'll say, oink, oink. I'm just so happy I got moinked. I know I do, and you will too. Keep American farming going by signing up at moinkbox.com/legalaf right now, and listeners of this show get free bacon for a year. That's 1 year of the best bacon you'll ever taste, but for a limited time. spelled MOINK, box.com/legalaf. That's moinkbox.com/legalaf.
When I think of summer smells, I think of sunscreen, salty beach air, barbecue on the grill, and unfortunately, body odor. But not this summer. Thanks to Lumi Whole Body Deodorant, BO will no longer be an unwelcome guest at my summer plans. Their pH optimized formula is clinically proven to block odor all day, and not just for your underarms. It's for everywhere we get odor. Your pits, your privates, your feet, your under, your other privates, etc. So you name it, no matter how hot it gets, you can still smell fresh and feel confident from head to toe, ready to make your freshest summer ever. There's a special offer here just for Legal AF. New customers get 15% off all Lumi products with our exclusive code and link. Use code Legal AF at Lumi, Lume, deodorant.com, and just use code Legal AF. I love Lumi. I love how versatile it is and that you can put it anywhere that you feel you need just that little extra help at smelling extra good. So it makes me feel confident, and I like that it was created by an OBGYN who really cares about women and women's bodies and making sure that things are done in a way that's healthy and pH balanced and designed for your body. It's baking soda free and paraben free, and because it's pH balanced, it's safe to use below the belt. So my favorite is Clean Tangerine, but they have other great scents like lavender sage or toasted coconut. So Lumi's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice like a mini body wash and deodorant wipes. So it also comes with free shipping. So as a special offer for our listeners, get 15% off all Lumi products with our exclusive code. And if you combine 15% off with the already discounted starter pack, that equals over 40% off the starter pack. So use code LEGALAF for 15% off your first purchase at lumedeodorant.com. Code LEGALAF. That's LUMEDEODORANT.com.
And we're back. All right. We've check-ined ourselves out here. Let's go back to New York.
You asked a question.
Sotomayor. Okay, yeah. This is we're going to get a lot of chat on this.
So it's interesting. I as you said that, I Googled how old is she? She's 70. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say,
I mean, I know, but what happens if something happens? By the way, it could happen to anybody. Clarence Thomas is older. Clarence Thomas is older. Alito is older, but they're not stepping down. Do you if she stepped down and they picked a 47-year-old?
Yeah, but don't and I'm just forgive me, but who was it that they blocked in the last year? And then do you remember what it was?
Garland.
Right, exactly. Oh my God. There you go. It all goes back to
you didn't want to remember that.
I really didn't, because you're absolutely right. They tried to put in Merrick Garland, they blocked it, and somehow Trump got Amy Coney Barrett through in like
38 days.
Yeah, how the hell? That's what I don't understand. There's somehow there's this imbalance between Democrats can't, they try to do something and somehow they can't get it done.
Yeah, and because we're not unscrupulous. And McConnell said he created a new rule. He said if you're in the waning days of your administration and the party, the House and the Senate are split, then that's a signal to the American people. How did Amy Coney
Barrett get through?
That's what he said. He said Trump lost, Biden won, but he didn't come in with both houses, did he? It's all made up.
It's all made up, and it's very frustrating. Yeah, very, very frustrating.
By the way, I'm not proposing it because I think she should. I think Sonia Sotomayor, her dissents alone are worth the price of admission and are important to democracy. But people that and yes, do I think that in retrospect that her name is fled on my head, that Ruth Bader Ginsburg stayed too long at the party? maybe, but she was vital and vibrant and writing opinions that mattered right up until the very end. And you know what? They have lifetime appointments, and sure, certain people retire. I mean, Justice Souter retired. I think he's still alive. Sometimes popes retire.
I know, but I mean, look, she was having health issues,
Yeah,
and
true.
she was amazing, but she was having health issues, and I think she was holding out because she thought Hillary was going to win, and she wanted to,
1000%.
you know,
I totally agree with you.
but you know,
But then she didn't. And then we are where we are. So I think everybody just sits tight. But
I know.
but to our law and politics intersection, that's why the November election is so important. I tell people, the hand wringing and the bedwetting about Joe Biden's campaign debate performance. You're voting for an administration. You're voting for the person at the top of the ticket, the vice president, all the people that he brings back in with him, the Secretary of State, all the major cabinet positions, and how they're conducting foreign and domestic policy. That's what you're voting for, and the Supreme Court. And you see what happens when people were like, well, I don't like Hillary. Hillary might be a little corrupt. I don't like her. I mean, I'll roll the dice with Donald Trump. And look what happened. And so, and the Supreme Court alone.
I hear you, and I agree with you, and I just want to say two things. Number one, I think we said this before. Someone said, when you're voting, it's not like picking a husband or a wife. It's more like, you're not falling in love. You're not picking the one. It's more like public transportation. You're looking for the train that gets you closest to the place you want to go at the closest time you're trying to get there.
You said it. That was your phrase.
Well, someone else
said that.
Yeah, I said it quoting somebody else. I didn't make that up. But the other thing, so I agree with that, and I will definitely vote for whoever is on the Democratic ticket at this election. Period. Full stop.
Yep.
But someone recently said to me, because I was having this debate, because as we can't pretend that the New York Times and everybody else is calling for the whole, right now there's a lot of people calling for Joe Biden to step down, and that's being talked about. And so having that discussion with people, and I said exactly what you just said, that you're picking an administration, you're picking people with advisors, et cetera. And someone said to me, yeah, and he's being advised by someone who thought having a debate was a good idea.
All right.
That, I mean,
I know there's always an answer.
But you know what? You can't pretend. We cannot pretend that didn't happen, that debate.
No, you can't. But as Justice Warnock, as Reverend Senator Warnock said, he's given bad sermons on Sunday, but he walks and lives the gospel. And I agree with that with Joe Biden. Other presidential candidates and presidents have had terrible first debates. Ronald Reagan wouldn't be president if you judged him by his first debate against Walter Mondale. There wouldn't be a Barack Obama. Now, they also weren't 81 years old.
Yeah, this wasn't a bad debate in those sense, though. Those debates are, I wasn't prepared, or I was out, whatever, maneuvered. There are significant questions into his competency that unfortunately that is coming. There was an article in the paper today that I read that is saying that the problem is worse than we knew, that has been going on in meetings. I mean, this has to be addressed in some way. We can't pretend.
Well, it's going to be. But it's going to be Joe Biden's decision as to whether he wants to continue as president or whether he wants to pass the mantle down to Kamala Harris. Or he wants to throw it open to a wide open convention. But he's earned the right, as far as I'm concerned, to make that decision along with his advisors. And if the American people don't like it, they can tell him so on November the 5th.
Yeah, I hear you. And like I said, I love the guy. I think he's been an amazing president. Yeah. I'm just worried.
I am too. Like I said, I could think of any number of people that would solve for the problem that we have with two 80-year-olds running against each other. And the good news for America, if there is an America left, which I'm sure, I think there will be, is that there's going to be a bunch of 50-year-olds fighting it out for the both parties' leadership over the next 4 years. And whoever gets in is going to be lame duck after 2.5 years, because that's just the nature of it. And so we're going to see a whole, if you like Gavin Newsom, you like Gretchen Whitmer, you like Pritzker, we can keep going. Pete Buttigieg, Kamala, you like all of them? They're all in their 50s and early 60s. You're going to have an opportunity to vote for them. It's just going to be 2028. And on the other side, they've got a bunch of, younger people too. Christine Noem will get over the dog shooting by then, and and all of that.
I don't know. I don't think you can ever get over a dog shooting, ever.
I would, not for me. I would,
but not from anybody. Like, you just can't.
I don't, Karen, I would have agreed with you. I mean, George Bush the first lost his election because he looked at his watch during a debate, but now we have a criminal president who you believe could also commit murder and get away with it. And people are thinking about voting him back in.
By the way, I'm not the only one who believes that. And I'm
not you. I mean, you. I mean, the fact that you
Sonia Sotomayor believes it as well.
I've heard of her.
I'm not the only person. But I'm terrified of Donald Trump becoming president. It's not just, it's not a matter of who do you like better. This isn't about the public transport. This is literally about, are you getting on a train, or are you getting on, a rocket ship or are you getting on like a missile that's going to come and destroy our country? Because that is what voting for Donald Trump is. This isn't just, Republican versus Democrat. This is literally the stakes couldn't be higher here. Like no other election, I think, ever.
But that's to you and me and our party and people that are independent that lean that way. To the MAGA and to the Republicans, they're doing an Irish jig in the streets because they think their guy has been vindicated, and they're as happy as you are, as you and I are fearful. They are ecstatic, and that is the divide in this country. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I like my presidents who aren't felons, who don't. Immunity doesn't mean you didn't do it. Immunity
not
just
only
means
a felon, he's a rapist.
Right. I like non-rapist, non-felon, non-felonious presidents. But hey, that's me. I'm crazy that way.
Same.
Yeah, but look, at the end of the day, the American people are going to have to choose. They're going to have to make their decision. I'm not telling them to ignore things that they've seen as part of data points. And if Joe Biden can't turn things around, like I said, you don't win the pennant in July. If in making his closing argument to the American people, he can't convince them of his vitality and his ability to do the job, and that it hasn't been diminished and impaired. And what we saw was what he's claiming now is that he was overtired, too many trips overseas, not enough prep. Although he did pick the format for this thing, I think the biggest mistake, if he ends up losing, is that they picked a debate format that was no energy, weird, with a mute button, and that he wasn't ready to go mano a mano with Donald Trump that way. And that's you're right. That is partly the people around him, his handlers, and how they prepared him for that. It also doesn't help that you and I aren't talking about him gearing up for another debate 2 weeks from now, like the regular cycle. Normally there's 2 to 3 weeks between debates, and you have 3 of them. The Biden decided to have 2 of them 2 months apart. You're right. That's a judgment issue. That's how you run your campaign is part of what you're being judged on. I totally agree with you.
Can I ask one more question before you move on?
This is your show. You don't even have to say, can I ask one more question?
Do you think, by the way, one of the things I love about you is you make me feel so much better, because I get, I'm a worrier. I can't help it.
Wait, I got one more. I did a hot take on it. Impeachment. If they vote, even if whatever happens with Biden, if everybody votes down ballot the right way and the House and the Senate go in large numbers to the Democrats, under my theory, not just my theory, under a theory, high crimes and misdemeanors and Donald Trump is the major check on an imperial president who's gone rogue, and that he can be removed upon arrival of being sworn in, even for past conduct, even if it is immune as a crime. It's not what the term of art, high crime and misdemeanors, refers to. So don't be surprised if the Senate and the House get picked up by the Democrats. There's not a move to try to impeach and remove him within the first months of his term.
And you don't think this MAGA, I love that idea. You don't think this MAGA Supreme Court will say, sorry, if you're immune, it's not a high crime and misdemeanor?
No, it's 600 years of jurisprudence, and you have they could, but you have the framers and the founding fathers like Alexander Hamilton and others like George Mason from Virginia, who at the last minute, when they had just bribery and treason listed in that provision, he said that's not enough. What about maladministration? What about the breach of the public trust? What about corruption, public corruption? And they said, well, let's use the term that we used back in the old-timey days in Britain, which is high crimes and misdemeanors, which was always seen as a political, not actual statutory crimes, and we'll cover all the things you're talking about. And George Mason said, good, let's do that and put it in. That is the legislative history of that particular provision of the Constitution.
Yeah, and I agree with that things that aren't necessarily enumerated as crimes, but when they are enumerated and you are immune from those crimes, right? They could have created a privilege. The Supreme Court could have created a privilege, and instead they created an immunity. And I think by doing that, it's just makes this a different potential ball game. But I do love how you've gamed that out. would love if he does get in and we take back the House and the Senate, that they would impeach him, convict him, remove him from office. I assume then the vice president, whoever he picks, would become president.
Yeah.
But I have a question for you.
Sure.
Under your theory of immunity, would Nixon be immune for his conduct from Watergate?
I never, there was never an indictment of Nixon, so I don't know exactly what they would have indicted. But you mean from a crime standpoint?
From a crime under the same analysis, right?
Yes, I have to be consistent. I don't think giving an order for your campaign, the committee to reelect the president, to go spy on the Democratic National Committee and to pay bribes and everything around the way is either a core presidential duty or even the exterior of official conduct. I think he would be without immunity.
So as we are talking, and I haven't read it yet, but there's an article written by John Dean in The Atlantic.
What did he say?
He said Richard Nixon would have been thrilled with the ruling of U.S. Supreme Court in Trump versus United States earlier this week. I would know I served as Nixon's White House counsel until he fired me for seeking to end the Watergate cover-up by openly cooperating with the investigation.
And then John Dean went to jail. Okay, I get you.
He says the new ruling, in effect, decriminalizes Nixon's conduct during the Watergate scandal.
I respectfully disagree with Mr. Dean. That's why people come here. They want to see disagreement. I don't agree with. I like John Dean a lot. There's a reason he went to jail. That's all I'm going to say. Let's pick up where we're going to go next, which is going to be back to New York. You'll lead on all of that. In fact, when we come back from commercial, Salty. Let's dive right into New York and the move of the 7/11 sentencing to a 9/18. The judge's comment, if necessary, there'll be a sentencing. What that all means, and what do you think is going to happen with this briefing that the Manhattan DA's office has agreed to about the application of this immunity decision on the particular 34 felony counts that the trial jury found against Donald Trump for actions, almost all of which happened before he was even a president, some of which happened in the White House where he's cutting checks. What your feeling is about that one. And I think that'll make for a very good show. Why don't we first go to our next commercial break and come right back, talk about New York. Proper sleep can increase focus, boost energy, and improve your mood. Introducing Beam's Dream Powder, a science-backed healthy hot cocoa for sleep. If you know me, you know that Dream has been a game changer for my sleep, and boy, do I need sleep these days. I drink Beam's Dream Powder each night in order to get my optimal sleep. And I gotta say, I wouldn't be recommending this if it didn't actually help me. And today, my listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder. Their science-backed healthy hot cocoa for sleep with no added sugar. Better sleep has never tasted better. Now available in delicious flavors like chocolate peanut butter, cinnamon cocoa, and sea salt caramel, with only 15 calories and 0 grams of sugar. Other sleep aids can cause next-day grogginess, but Dream contains a powerful all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, melatonin, and nano CBD to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. The numbers don't lie. In a clinical study, 93% of participants reported Dream helped them get better sleep. Beam Dream is easy to add to your nighttime routine. Just mix Dream into hot water or milk froth and enjoy before bed. Find out why Forbes and the New York Times are all talking about Beam and why it's trusted by the world's top athletes and business professionals. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, get up to 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/legalaf and use code legalaf at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/legalaf and use code legalaf for up to 40% off.
My old laundry detergent used to drive me crazy. It comes in those big plastic jugs. They make a mess. They drip everywhere. It's hard to pour. And so I just really dislike it very much. And of course, I do a lot of laundry. I have a big family. And it's so frustrating when you are doing laundry and you have to use that big plastic jug. And, frankly, I don't love the smell. And it smelled very synthetic to me. So this podcast, I'm loving the sponsor. It's called Laundry Sauce. Laundry Sauce has created the world's best smelling laundry detergent in simple to use, high performance pods. Laundry Sauce has transformed the mundane task of doing laundry into a luxurious and exciting experience. So you don't have to dread laundry anymore. And what is the secret behind Laundry Sauce? They partnered with one of the top fragrance houses in the world, the same team behind many of your favorite designer scents, from Australian sandalwood to Egyptian rose to cyber pine. Laundry Sauce will make it so that laundry day will never smell the same again. Plus, they stripped away all the unnecessary ingredients and artificial dyes that now is more science-backed, with stain fighters and enzymes that are much better to ensure your favorite clothes come out looking brand new and not smelling synthetic. And I love it so much. My whole house smells like it now, and it's a great thing. So they have reviews on their site. You should check them out. They're funny reviews. They're very authentic. Laundry Sauce was started in 2021 by a team who were bored by the mundane scents in their detergent aisle. So they decided to make a product that was conscious, relevant, and innovative. It's not just the pods. Laundry Sauce makes scent boosters, dryer sheets, dryer balls, fabric softeners, and even candles too. So if you aren't happy, send back Laundry Sauce for a full refund, no questions asked. Elevate your laundry with Laundry Sauce. Now is the time to experience Laundry Sauce. Head to laundrysauce.com/legalaf and use promo code legalaf at checkout for 15% off. That's the best offer you'll find, but you must use code legalaf for 15% off your order. That's laundrysauce.com/legalaf, promo code legalaf for 15% off.
Our audience is going to be clean smelling, whether they like it or not. Thank you to all of our sponsors today. And
I love our products, and I love our sponsors.
Too. I mean, I'm just saying a lot of them had to do with the BO or how your laundry smells or whatever I did today. And I really appreciate it. We're not on the air without, people are like, why so many ads? We're not on the air without our pro-democracy sponsors, and not just listening to them. And don't tune out. Support them, because that helps too. Because then they go, well, we sold a couple of products on that show. We should re-advertise. That's my artist rendering of what sponsors sound like. Let's turn to New York and turn it over to you. Turn the microphone over to you. Let's kick off with the immunity decision. Your old Manhattan DA's office making the decision not to oppose Donald Trump, trying to argue that somehow he's immune from his candidate Donald Trump attempts to hide his sex act with Stormy Daniels from the American public while he was running for office in October and November of that election year against Hillary Clinton. He cut a few checks and some invoices came in, all private checkbooks, private invoices to Donald Trump. He happened to be sitting in the Oval Office at the time that he did it. But you can then take your analysis of the various absolute and rebuttable presumption immunities and apply it to this and tell me what you think is going to happen in New York and the timeline related to it as we move into a new, updated, continued hearing date of September the 18th.
Yeah, I'd love to hear if you agree with my assessment here. So this is really interesting, how this immunity decision applies to New York and the conviction that just happened. A couple of things just to kind of level set, there's a post-verdict motion in New York called a 330 motion. It just essentially means anything from the time of a verdict before sentencing, that little window, that's your time to file any motions you have about the trial, about the verdict that you want addressed before sentencing. And it's so that it becomes part of the record, so that if you appeal, it will be part of the official case record. So that's the posture we're in. The judge gave Donald Trump until June 13th to file any 330 motions. He didn't. And then this decision came down on July 1st. So some people were arguing, well, he missed his deadline to file a 330 motion. No surprise that Judge Merchan is giving him a chance to do this. How could you file a motion if the decision hadn't even come down yet? So that doesn't surprise me at all. It also doesn't surprise me that Donald Trump would ask that they have an opportunity to brief this and to put off the sentencing. I'm also not surprised that the prosecution consented to an adjournment and wants this briefed as well. Because what has to happen now is the exact same thing that Judge Chutkan is doing, which is make a record of what's official and what's unofficial and just make a finding. And a judge has to make a finding. And so that's what Judge Merchan has to do. Unlike Judge Chutkan, however, who has to hold hearings and have evidence and have testimony and actually analyze things, that already happened at the trial. Every single witness, every piece of evidence, it's all in. And not only is it in, and it was also cross-examined vigorously by the defense. And so it's all out there. All the judge has to do is apply the law to the facts and make a record. And so that's what he needs time to do. And that's why he put it over until September 18th. Now, what he said was his decision will come before September 18th. I can't remember the date, but a week before, I think. And then he said these ominous words, and if necessary, a sentencing will be on September 18th. And everybody clutched their, gut and said, oh my God, what do you mean if necessary? Does that mean it's going to impact it? It's typical Judge Merchan to put it that way. He doesn't prejudge anything. He leaves everything open. And so, look, this could theoretically impact the case if he's immune. If this is all official conduct, yes, the conviction would get thrown out. That being said, I think it's very clear that most of this case, if not all of this case, will be fine. And it's for several reasons. Number one, Donald Trump, and through his lawyers, is on record saying this is personal conduct. Don't forget, there was a removal hearing to go to federal court. And in the removal hearing, Judge Hellerstein, there were proceedings and motion practice and hearings because Donald Trump didn't want to be prosecuted in state court. He wanted to be removed because he was a federal officer to federal court. He thought he had, I think, better luck of the draw of having a better judge. I don't really know why they want to get removed to federal court, but that's what they wanted. That's what he wanted. And during that proceeding, that a lot was conceded and put on the record and found by a federal judge already. And so there's no doubt that this is all private conduct and personal conduct. He also withdrew he made a presidential immunity claim and then he waived it. He withdrew it. So that issue is not necessarily preserved here. That being said, I do think the judge will apply this new law to the facts. And the only facts that I think are going to be in this category of presumption or that might fall into this presumption category. In other words, he gets the presumption that it's official, but then the prosecution has to overcome it. And I think they do. Has to do with Hope Hicks' testimony. I think her name was Madeline Westerhout's testimony. I mean, these were White House employees. Okay. These are conversations between Donald Trump and White House employees. I think
part of Hope Hicks. She was also the campaign press secretary.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Part of Hope Hicks. I think that gets you into the presumption. I think that makes it presumptively immune because it's because they're employees of the White House. That's part of talking to them openly and unfettered, vigorously and energetic. But that's how you overcome the presumption. So right, but I'm first you have to be put into a bucket.
You think if the conversation takes place in the Oval Office, it's automatically official conduct?
I think it's presumptively official, and then you have to overcome that. You have to rebut the presumption. And so there's certain things that aren't presumptive, right? Conversations with Jeffrey Clark. That is official conduct, period, full stop. Cannot even, there's not presumption. There's
that's
no
core.
way to,
That's even
right.
core.
That's my point. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's core official conduct. And so that you can't rebut that. There's no, that's a, it's out no matter what. There is this gray area that you are presumed to be immune, but you can rebut it. It can come out. And I do think those fall into the presumptive category because they're White House employees working for the president and they want to promote a vigorous and energetic, not looking over your shoulder presidency. So I think I think those two witnesses go into that presumptive bucket, but I think the record easily overcomes it because it was about personal matters. It was not about anything official or presidential. So I do think those witnesses. And then the next area where I think is also going to fall into this presumptive category is going to have to do with the tweets that were from the White House Twitter account that were put into evidence. They will say, they specifically said communication with the public in this decision. They said communication with the public is a core, is a duty, is part of the presidential function, and I think that's going to be also presumptive. He's going to be in the presumptive immunity category that can be rebutted by other evidence. I think it'll all come out. I think those are the only pieces of evidence that I can think of that will be impacted by this at all. I think they will be found to be unofficial as opposed to official and therefore not subject to any of this. However, I do think you're going to hear the judge say, even if I'm wrong, the evidence is overwhelming and it's harmless error. So even if I made the wrong decision and it turns out those pieces of evidence should not have come in, then I think he's going to do a harmless error analysis, and I think he prevails. So I do think that the conviction will stand. I think it'll be okay. I do think the sentencing is delayed. I think there will be a sentencing. And as I've said many times, I think he will receive a sentence of incarceration. But this decision, to me, makes it even more likely that the judge will stay sentencing or pause the sentencing pending appeal, because obviously now that the immunity decision's out, there's a significant issue that needs to be reviewed. So he will, that's my kind of prediction of how things are going to go here.
Yeah. So you're on incarceration now, no longer subway litter picking up, right?
Yes, I have, because, when you look at the other cases that have received incarceration, you can't ignore that this is by far the most serious of them. It's only 20% or so of this people charged with the statute who have received incarceration. However, when you look at the facts that support that and the egregiousness of it, this makes them look petty. And in addition, when you add his post-trial conduct, all the threats and the baseball bat and all that stuff, and you look at his being held in contempt 10 times, and you even look at his I'm sorry, that was pre-trial conduct. You look at his post-trial conduct, where he doesn't take responsibility for his actions and he shows no remorse, etc. I really think that all of those factors will lead the judge to have no choice but to say, look, if I'm going to treat you like every other person, anyone else who's not named Donald Trump, who is in this position with all the things that I just described, you have to sentence him to incarceration. He's just not going to go to jail until after his appeals are up.
Yeah, you and I come to the same exact place from slightly different angles. I don't think because it happens in the White House that it automatically converts into official acts. If you read the majority opinion, this is the basis I'm using, taking into account, this is from page 14, taking into account these competing considerations, we conclude that the separation of powers principles explicated in our precedent necessitate at least a presumptive immunity from criminal prosecution for a president's acts within the outer perimeter of his official responsibility. I don't see him directing the payoff of Stormy Daniels and repaying Michael Cohen out of a private checkbook to even be within the outer Blassingham perimeter of official responsibility. So I don't think you have to even get to the rebuttable presumption, because
no,
I would.
yeah.
Let me finish my thought.
Sorry.
And so it's either one of two things. It's either, as you said, it's an official conduct. So because of all these people's involvement, and then you need to rebut it, and they will successfully rebut it, or you never have to get there because it's an unofficial conduct that is prosecutable. And I'm in that last category.
So I completely agree with you that paying a porn star and all, everything you just said is unofficial. And so I don't think the conviction will stand. I'm talking about the part of the decision that says the evidence.
Oh, okay. And you're talking about all right. I agree with you there, that the evidence about covered conduct should not have come in. And I agree with you that the judge should find, and the appellate court should also find, that it is harmless error. But just to leave the note, to square the circle here, he's going to make his decision, Mershon. He may or may not sentence he said, I may or may not sentence. It depends on where we are in the briefing. The first line of appeals, to answer a prior question about why did they want to take it to federal, because they wanted to stay in the federal track, federal appellate court, federal Supreme Court, straight shot. Here they got to go through, arguably, they got to go through up to the Court of Appeals in New York. Then they're going to have to try to jump the track with a writ to take it over to the United States Supreme Court, which is sort of, and that's delay. He may sentence and then suspend, waiting to see how this immunity thing plays out. But I agree. There should be no immunity for this, even under the outer perimeters of everything we've just discussed, and that Mershon's going to find that there's no immunity for it, and any of the other evidence that was let in, which was relatively minor. Hope Hicks mainly testified about how the campaign freaked out when they found out about the hot mic moment in about Access Hollywood, with Trump bragging about grabbing a woman by her vagina, which he can get away with because he's a celebrity, and how they then lit the fuse for the catch and kill program through the National Enquirer, Michael Cohen, David Pecker, Donald Trump, the three co-conspirators in the Trump Tower conspiracy. That's real. Yeah, she talked about it. Well, he gets mail, and he was very concerned about the articles and the media. And then I couldn't believe I was even picked, as I really wasn't qualified to be a communications director. And yeah, I get that. That's why I totally agree with you on the harmless error thing. And then, to another point, just to round it out, the Department of Justice has basically taken the position that their guidance about not indicting or moving forward with a criminal prosecution that's within 60 days or so of an election and putting it in a box does not apply when there's already been an indictment and the criminal case is already up and running, or they're in trial, for instance, as the election nears, and that they are not going to let the calendar of the political calendar influence their decision, and they will prosecute up to election day and beyond. I mean, if the unthinkable happens, Joe Biden is still president until the 19th or the noon on the 20th of January. And plenty of time to continue a prosecution related to it. We know what happens if Donald Trump gets in. Donald Trump gets in, and any prosecution that's federal against him or people around him gets killed and gets ended. And this Supreme Court will say, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. He has that's an absolute core power related to removal, related to appointment, related to all the things that are within the Department of Justice being within the executive branch. You can do midnight firings of your attorney generals. That's not obstruction of justice. And that is fine. That's the power we give to the person who gets the job. Remember that when you vote. That is the power, this new powers, that the superpowers that the Supreme Court has given, it's there. And now you think about what that power means in the hands of somebody like Donald Trump. That's what Joe Biden was saying in his closing argument that he started to make the day after the immunity decision came out, which I thought was a very powerful speech. He was basically like, think about the new powers that have now been given, and immunity and shield that have been given, and in the wrong hands, how do you think that's going to turn out? I agree with that. I think that's the right argument to be making to the American people. Karen, we sort of reached the end here, but you always have some great things to talk about at the very end. And I want to give you that opportunity to share with the audience anything that's sort of popped up. And then two things though before one is I'll promote and you promote Mistrial, our sister podcast, if you will, that you're anchoring. There it is, Karen Freeman McNifilo, Danya Perry, Kathleen Rice, taking it from a prosecutor's standpoint, and having some great interviews as well. And that's appearing. Do we have a regular date for that yet?
We're trying. We're working on it. So usually it's going to be Thursdays, but we're sometimes going to have them pop up sooner, depending on what's going on.
Is there one this week?
There is, and it's going to actually drop at some point today.
Oh, it's going to be today. Okay. Okay. Is there a special guest?
No.
Is there a method to the madness of keeping people guessing when Mistrial is going to appear?
We're just trying to figure out what the right slot is because, look, there's so many shows on the so many amazing shows on the Midas Touch Network, right? And it's just trying to figure out what slot works for both our schedule, breaking news, and the Midas Touch Network. So
I'm sure Ben has an opinion about that.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that's what we're trying to sort through. And today the problem is there's some technical difficulties, which is why if I'm being a little cagey, it's because we're having some technical difficulties. But it's a great episode that everyone should watch.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to promote the show. We also have, for those that geek out on the law side of law in politics, we've got a 3,500 strong Patreon community for Legal AF at patreon.com/legalaf. Ben and I are doing some amazing, I think, breakdowns of the law, civil and criminal, federal and state, constitutional, civil rights, women's rights, reproductive rights, Supreme Court rulings, and anything else that from our audience tells us they'd like to learn more about at patreon.com/legalaf. Entry-level membership is about $10 a month, and we've already got about 70 exclusive videos that are up. We did a almost 2-hour I almost said meet and confer, which is a legal term, 2-hour Zoom chat Q&A, where when we weren't able to, we were either answering them live in real time for the audience, or I or Ben were backfilling, answering questions within the chat itself. So that, and we're going to do another one. We decided in July, we'll probably do something about the Supreme Court term. We're going to we're going to get the band back together again of Karen, me, and Ben. We're going to talk about, I think, the United States Supreme Court this past term and what to expect in the next term. That's fun to do during the summer. So we'll do that as well. And Karen, I'll turn it over to you for any last words. With your mic on.
Sorry. Yeah, I was on mute because my dogs just came in and have decided to make a huge noise. So I put it on mute. So hello, Boogie.
A joyful noise of Boogie and the dogs.
Yes, exactly. I just can't help but really, the 4th of July has turned into a really solemn kind of day in a way, given where we are at this moment in time. And I just can't help but really reflect and think about the Midas Touch Network and the Midas Mighty and this movement that we are all a part of, and just how incredible it is. I don't know anyone else who saw this as early as the three brothers did and decided to create this space for us to come and tell the truth and talk about these issues, and to really just get facts out there and have a place for us all to come together, be with like-minded people. And there's just been a trust that has been developed, relationships that have been developed. And, I can't help but notice there's a lot of other people who are, the greatest compliment in the world is when people replicate what you're doing. But it's just fascinating to me that so many other podcasts and individuals and also just news shows that are following suit and replicating what the brothers and we have done here. And I just am so honored to have been part of this for so long. And that's what I'm sort of thinking about and reflecting on this 4th of July. And really so grateful that you're in my life, Popok. I learned so much from you. And one of the really great joys in my life is having gotten to meet you and your beautiful family. And I'm just so feeling incredibly, incredibly grateful. And, I just, it can be very if people who are in the world who are like me and can be a little doom and gloom and not very, who can sometimes see things and it's like, oh my God, like it's scary, it's scary what's happening. You see Donald Trump, he's a criminal, he's a rapist, he's horrific. You see what's happening on the Supreme Court, you see what's happening, women's rights are being taken away. I have a kid, who has some intellectual disabilities and she's terrified. She's like, Mom, what does this mean? Are my rights going to be taken away? And you just look at the country we're in and it can be really scary. And what this place gives me hope, and hearing from you and from Ben and from all the other people who come together on this network, and frankly, our followers, I sound so, our colleagues in social media is what I'd rather call people, people who just really come and give us such hope and you don't feel alone. You don't feel as scared. And so I'm just feeling grateful for that and for all the people who come here each week and listen to our podcast and join us and participate and come to the comments, et cetera. So that's what I want to say today.
That is so beautifully poignant that I won't step on it other than to say, whenever I'm around you, people in your life, your family, your husband, Ben, and all, just a warm embrace and that bosom of that friendship and that kinship does sustain me in any dark hours, especially when we're doing a lot of work in the dark by ourselves in front of microphones and laptops. You guys, along with our audience, are the fuel that motivate me. And as I joked recently, I think I'm employee badge number 4, you're employee badge number 5. For this network, and because we've been here so long from the very, very beginning, and it is time to reflect. Memorial Day and the 4th of July. I'm getting all my MAGA people in my life writing me crappy 4th of July distorted messages, and I'm just like, please, I have so much faith in the jury system and in our electorate to do the right thing come November the 5th, despite what the polls and pundits are saying, but. Always my pleasure to be here with you. So we've got Mistrial, which is coming up. You got to keep an eye on it. You got to set a reminder so you know when that show is going to be on, with Karen anchoring that, along with 2 other prosecutors, Danya Perry and Kathleen Rice. You've got patreon.com/legalaf. All these things help keep the show on the air, keep your favorite anchors on the air. And then we've got another show that Ben and me will be doing on Saturday, whereas the weekend wrap up of all things that have happened, and we give you our analysis there as well. So until our Saturday show and all of our hot takes and podcasts, it's Michael Popak, Karen Friedman, Ignifilo for the midweek edition of Legal AF. Shout out to the Mighty and the Legal AFers.